Welcome to Shahnameh, Book of Kings. Today we continue the Reign of Hormozd. The Persian king was pleased to hear this from him and no longer feared Saveh Shah's forces. He made Bahram the commander of his army, lifting this warrior's head to the clouds, and all those who looked for renown in the wars hailed Bahram as their chief. Bahram came before his king, armed and ready for combat, and asked permission to review the army's troops to see who was eager for war and who would hold back when there was glory to be won. The king replied, "You are their commander, responsible for whatever good or evil comes of this." Bahram went to the plain where the king reviewed his warriors and ordered that the Persian army appear before him. He chose the best of them and registered the names of 12,000 armed cavalry whose horses were protected with barding. He enrolled men who were in their 40s and refused to consider those who were older or younger. Bahram had overall charge of the army, and he made his second in command a man called Sinna, whose heart longed for war. He was to lead the troops into battle, curveting his horse, reminding the men of their lineage and filling their hearts with courage. Another of his subordinates was Goshap, who would not turn his horse back from a raging fire. His responsibility was to watch the baggage and to see that the two flanks of the army coordinated their attack. The rear of the army was commanded by Goshap, a man who could seize lions by the tail when he rode. Then Bahram addressed his army. "Noble and valiant warriors, see that you act righteously in everything you do. If you would have God turn your present night to dawn and victory with his glorious might, see that in darkness, when the trumpets sound, you'll leap into the saddle from the ground and ride as if the sun itself arose at midnight to do battle with our foes. Don't dream of rest until the battle's done. Rest is for when our victory is won." The king rejoiced to hear Bahram's preparations and his speech, and threw open the doors of his treasury. He made weapons available to Bahram, and had his war horses brought into the town from their pastures, saying that the new commander could choose any of them for himself. Then he said, "You've heard what quantities of troops and arms and treasures Saveh Shah commands, and that the earth trembles when he takes the field. And yet you have chosen only 12,000 armed men, together with their horses, protected by barding. And I don't know if they will be sufficient on the day of battle. And instead of young swordsmen, you ask for men in their 40s. Bahram replied, "Your Majesty, you speak truly, and are favored by fortune. You have heard tales of the great men who ruled the world before us, and how when fortune promised victory to them, a few troops were sufficient. If the king will permit me, I will give you some examples. When Kavas was imprisoned in Hamaviran with a huge army, Rostam chose 12,000 of the finest cavalry he could find. He freed Kavas from confinement, and the force he had chosen was undefeated. In the same way, Gudaz, the chieftain of Keshvad clan, took 12,000 armed cavalry with him in his war of vengeance for the death of Siavash. And the great Asfandiar and the great Asfandiar took 12,000 warriors against Arjasp. He was able to razz the enemy's fortresses and accomplish all his aims with them. If an army has more men in it than it has become uncontrollable, and the commander is distracted on the battlefield. As for your saying that 40-year-olds can't fight better than young men, a man of 40 has experience and has courage, and that is greater for it. He knows what loyalty is, and remembers the bread and salt he received. The heavens are turned many times above his head. He fears shame and the mockery of his detractors, and because of them he won't avoid fighting. A grown man's soul is steeled by thoughts of wife and children and family. A young man is easily tricked, and when he must wait, he has no patience. He has no wife or children or fields to think of, and he confuses what's important with what doesn't matter. Because an inexperienced man has no wisdom, he can't see things as they really are. If he's victorious on the day of battle, he's happy and laughs and wastes his time. And if victory isn't his, the enemy will see nothing of him except his back." At these words, the king felt as refreshed as a rose in the spring. "Go put on your armor," he ordered Bahram, "and make your way to the reviewing ground." The commander left the king and asked for his belt, cuirass, and helmet. He strapped Barding onto his horse and tied a lariat to the stirrups. The king came to the reviewing ground with his vizier, bringing arrows, polo mallets, and balls. His commander appeared and prostrated himself in the dust before his king, who gave him his blessing, and in response the commander kissed the ground. Then the king held up a banner on which was depicted a purple dragon. This was the banner that had gone before Rostam in his wars, and the king lifted it lightly and kissed it, laughing as he did so, and handed it to Bahram. He called down many blessings on the banner and said to Bahram, "This banner belonged to the man my ancestors always called the first of champions, whose name was Rostam, who conquered the world and was victorious and pure of soul. It is his banner you hold in your hand, and may you be victorious and loyal to your king. I believe you are another Rostam in your courage, heroism, and loyalty." Bahram called down blessings on the king and said, "May you be victorious, and your soul remain untroubled." Then he left the reviewing ground for his lodging, grasping Rostam's banner in his fist. The army's warriors dispersed, and their commander was content. When the first light of dawn appeared above the mountains, and the sun's glittering yellow shield shone there, the army's commander came before his king, his arms folded over his chest in submission, to say, "I have all I could wish, and by your far I am the crown of the age. But I have one request to make of your majesty. It is that you send someone trustworthy with me, a scribe, who can report back the name of anyone who distinguishes himself in battle and brings the enemy's heads down into the dust, so that his fame may live in the world." Hormozd replied, "The scribe, Mehan, is young, eloquent, and intelligent," and he gave orders that Mehran accompany the army. Then the commander, alert as a male lion at the head of his experienced, courageous troops, immediately set off from Ctesiphon. Hormozd said to his vizier, "He is a brave man and will triumph on the battlefield. But what do you think will happen then?" "We should discuss this at length, don't you think?" The vizier replied, "May you live long forever, since this is what you deserve. This champion, with his great strength and stature, with his quick tongue and confident spirit, will surely be victorious and overthrow the king's enemies. But I fear that in the end he will turn against the king who has favored him. He's very forward in his speech, and he acts like a lion when he talks with your majesty." Hormozd said, "You're the most suspicious man alive. Don't confuse poison with this antidote. If he defeats Saveh Shah, he deserves a crown and a throne. This is my hope, that he reign as a prince praised and successful." The vizier was abashed and held his tongue, but in his heart the king pondered what he said, and before long he chose a spy from among his courtiers, saying, "Someone should follow up on this suspicion." He said to him, "Hurry after the army commander and report back to me on what you see." The man sped away. Bahram and no one knew of his mission. He was both a guide to what was happening and an interpreter of omens, someone who told the king what the outcome of everything would be. As Bahram rode from Ctesiphon at the head of his army with his lance in his hand, he saw a seller of sheep's heads in the distance. The man had a tray on which was a number of dressed heads. Bahram urged his horse forward and spitted one of the heads on his lance, lifting up the lance as he rode and then flinging the head down at will. He took this as a sign and said, "This is how I shall deal with Saveh Shah's head. I'll throw it down in the road before his troops. Then I'll destroy his whole army." The man the king had sent saw this and interpreted appropriately, thinking, "This man has fortune on his side, and his efforts will gain him a throne." But then When he has what he wants in his grasp, he'll stubbornly defy this king." He returned and reported this to the king, who grew anxious and worried. The man's words seemed worse than death to him. He became dejected, like a green leaf that shrivels and turns black. He called for a young messenger to hurry after Bahram, instructing him, "Go and tell the army's commander to halt where he is tonight. At dawn, he is to return here to me, where I'll clear the court and give him some advice. I've remembered a number of useful things I have to tell him." The young messenger caught up with Bahram and told him what he had heard from the king, but Bahram answered, "Tell him, you're a wise king, and people don't summon armies back when they are on the march. To return as you suggest would be a bad omen, and our enemies would be strengthened to hear of it. I'll come to your court once I'm victorious, and I've made your army and country glow with splendor." The messenger returned and told the king what warlike Bahram had said. The king was pleased at this answer, and the messenger's efforts had no result. At dawn, Bahram called down blessings on the army and marched them as far as Custan. No one along the route came to do any harm. When they pitched camp, a woman with a sack full of straw ran between the ranks. A horseman came and brought the sack from her, but he refused to pay and tugged at his reins and rode off. The woman went wailing to Bahram and said, "I had little straw, and I thought I could sell it, so I brought it to your army, but now a horseman has stolen it from me. He has an iron helmet on his head." They immediately searched for the man and dragged him before Bahram, who said to the thief, "You will lose your head for this sin you've committed." He was dragged, stumbling, in front of the tents, and his head, arms, and legs were smashed to pieces. Bahram split him in two with his sword to terrify anyone else there who was inclined to act unjustly. A proclamation was made in front of Bahram's pavilion. "Whoever steals one stalk of straw will find no mercy. I shall split his body open with my sword. Buy whatever you need with silver coins." But Hormozd was constantly troubled by his thoughts, thinking now of Saveh Shah and his wealth and more elephants, then of the anxieties and fear he felt because of Bahram. His soul was full of sorrow. His fearful heart was split in two with worry. In night's darkness, after the moon set, the king said to Khorad-Borzin, "Contrive to reach our enemy. Go as quickly as you can, and don't rest on the way. Observe his army, who and how many they are, and who their leaders and warriors are." Then he had a letter written filled with advice for his dangerous adversary, and it was accompanied by innumerable royal presents. He said to his envoy, "Travel towards Herat. On your way you'll meet with Bahram's army. Turn aside from your destination and tell Bahram that I'm sending flattering messages to Saveh Shah in order to lure him into a trap, and that Saveh Shah is not to learn of his identity or intentions." Khorad-Borzin set out and talked with Bahram as his king had ordered, and from there he traveled out to where Saveh Shah was, camped with his elephants and wealth and army. He praised and flattered him, and passed on Hormozd's secret message, amplifying it in everything so that Saveh Shah would march on to Herat. This he did, pitching camp by the river there. A scout then saw Bahram's troops and ran to Saveh Shah, saying that a mighty army was approaching. Saveh Shah was alarmed by this news. He summoned Hormozd's envoy from the tent and spoke to him angrily. "You deceitful devil! Haven't you seen how far you could fall up there on the heights? You've come from that wretched king of yours to tempt me into an ambush. You're bringing up a Persian army to attack me. They've pitched camp on the plains of Herat." Khorad-Borzin answered, "Don't misconstrue things when you see a few troops in front of you. This is some lord of the marches who's going somewhere, or it's someone who's fled from his own country and is seeking asylum with you, or it's a merchant who's traveling with an escort to be safe on the road. Who would be foolish enough to oppose you, unless the mountains and oceans are going to fight?" Saveh Shah was satisfied by this answer and replied, "Let us hope things are as you say." Night came quickly from the mountains as Khorad-Borzin returned to his tent. He made preparations for flight to avoid the destruction that was certain to descend on him otherwise. As the darkness deepened, Saveh Shah sent his wise young son with an escort to his enemy's leader. As he drew near the Persian force, the young prince dispatched a horseman to inquire as to whose troops were and why they were advancing on this territory. A Turk rode forward like the wind and called out, "Mighty warriors! Who is your commander? Who leads the army? Who is the finest fighter among you? Because our crown prince, whom Saveh Shah loves more than his own eyes and heart, wants to see him without an escort." A warrior came to Bahram and told him what he had heard, and the commander came out of his tents and stood there beneath his glittering banner. When the prince saw him, he urged his horse forward, so that it was covered in sweat. He asked, "Where have you ridden from, and why have you pitched your camp here? I've heard that you fled from Persia, and that you're a fugitive who has blood on his hands." Bahram replied, "God forbid that I think of opposing Persia's king. I have come here with my army from Baghdad at the king's orders to fight. When news of Saveh Shah's army reached the royal court, he told me to march out and block their way with maces, lance, swords, and arrows." The prince immediately returned to his father and told him what had happened. Saveh Shah grew suspicious at his words and sent for the Persian envoy. But he was told that Khorad-Borzin has fled, weeping bitter tears of regret that he had come here. Saveh Shah asked his son, "How did that wretch find a route to go by? The night was dark. There's a huge army here. How could our sentinels be so negligent?" Then Saveh Shah sent an old man, a fine orator, to Bahram with orders to say, "Don't be such a fool as to lose your reputation here. You should at least realize one thing, that this king of yours is trying to get you killed. He sent you to fight with someone who has no equal in all the world. He said to you, go and block his advance. But haven't you heard the unsettling news that if a mountain is in my way, I can flatten it with my army and elephants?" When Bahram heard these words, he laughed at the man's blustering tactics. He answered, "If secretly the world's king wants to kill his slave, I cannot contradict his will. If it would please him, then it's right that I find my grave here. I am prepared to die." The messenger returned to Saveh Shah and gave him the warrior's answer. Saveh Shah said, "Go and question the Persian again. Say, why do you need to talk so much? Why have you come here? Ask from me whatever you wish." The messenger went to Bahram and said, "Tell us whatever it is you're hiding. My king's star is in the ascendant, and he is looking for subjects like you." Bahram replied, "Tell him this. If you want war, stop all this pretense. But if you want to make peace with the world's king, then I shall entertain you in the borderlands here, and I shall obey your commands. I shall give your troops gold and silver and crowns and belts of office to those who are worthy of them. I shall send a horseman to the king, and he will come halfway to meet you. He will provide you with foraging as one ally to another. If you want friendship, the king will treat you well. But if you've come here to fight, then you should realize you've entered the sea, and it's a sea monster you'll be fighting. You'll retreat from the plains of Herat in such a wretched state that our nobility will weep for you. I wish you pits before you, winds at your back, rain to accompany you. It's your bad luck that has brought you here, intending to bring down evil on your head." The messenger hurried back like the wind and recounted every detail of what Bahram had said. Saveh Shah was enraged to hear this reply, and the cold words just ate at his heart. His face turned pale. He said to his envoy, "Go back again and take the demon my answer. Say, there is no fame to be had from fighting with you, and I'll give me no satisfaction to kill you. I've courtiers crowded at my door like your king. The least of my servants are your superiors. But if you appeal to me for my protection, I'll lift your head above them all. You'll find immense wealth, and all your army will be well equipped. An ambitious man like you doesn't try to prove his courage by pointless, idle talk." Once more, the messenger returned to Bahram and passed on his master's urgent, heartfelt message. And again Bahram replied, "I cannot hide my answer from your lord. Say this to him. If indeed I'm as lowly as you say, I feel no shame because of it. The king of kings is ashamed to fight with someone as insignificant as you. It's my unimportance that has made me the leader of this army, which I've brought here in order to destroy Saveh Shah's forces. I'll cut your head off, and I'll take it to my king, and it's not even worth spitting on my lance to display it as I ride here. It would shame you if I asked for your protection, and so in my insignificance I've come to attack you. You won't see me except on the battlefield with my purple banner fluttering behind me, and when you see the dragon embroidered there, that will be the sign of your death. I shall sheath my lance in your head and helmet." After hearing such hostile talk, Saveh Shah's envoy turned his back on Bahram. He told Saveh Shah all he had heard and seen, and the Turkish king's head seethed with longing for vengeance. He ordered that his war drums be readied, his towering elephants be led onto the plain. All the land became black with dust, and his army's hooves and the squeal of trumpets rang out. When Bahram heard that the enemy troops were approaching, and that the plain had turned red, yellow, and black with their banners, he ordered his men to mount, and he came forward armed with his mace in hand. Behind him was the city of Herat, ahead an army with drawn swords. He continued and coordinated the right and left flanks of his forces, all of whom were eager for battle. It seemed that all the world was made of iron, and that the stars were glittering lances. Saveh Shah looked at the troop ranged against him. Herat was to the rear of Bahram's men, and Saveh Shah's own situation was hemmed in and unfavorable. He said to his horsemen, men of long experience, sympathized with his cause, "That Persian commander has tricked me. He delayed until his armies had occupied the city, and he's left the reed bed to us." He drew up his army's ranks in the narrow space left to them. The sky was darkened, and the earth disappeared. He had 40,000 men on his right flank, but they were so hemmed in that they could hardly wield their swords, and there were another 40,000 in the rear. Because of the limited space, many of his troops could do nothing. In the van of his army were his elephants, blocking the way like a wall. Saveh Shah was distraught that his army was unable to maneuver. It seemed that fortune had turned against him, and that his throne would soon be vacant. Once again, Saveh Shah sent a messenger, a glib, deceitful warrior, from the plains of Herat to Bahram, saying, "The heavens have no love for you. Be wise. Open your heart's eyes and listen to my advice. There are 2 peerless nobles in the world, shining like the sun in the heavens, armed all year round and ready to fight. I, the rightful ruler of the world, am one, and the other is my son. My troops outnumber the leaves on the trees, supposing that they could be counted. If I could count my elephants and warriors, they would make the numbers of raindrops that fall in the spring seem laughable to you. I own more armor and tents and pavilions than you can imagine. The mass of my horses and warriors would terrify the very mountains and deserts. Kings are my servants, or worthy to be counted as such. If the seas could flow here and the mountains run, they would not be sufficient to move the treasures and troops that I've accumulated. All the nobles of the world, except the Persian lord of yours, called me king. My soul can see clearly enough that your fate is in my hands. If I advance my armies, there will not be space for an ant or a mosquito to pass. I've 1,000 armored elephants and horses. Flee at the scent of them. Who in all Iran can stand before me and block my way? My men occupy the land from here to Ctesiphon, and the numbers there will grow. Who has deceived you? What fool has tricked you? You've no mercy on yourself, or if you have, it's hidden away because it can't tell good from evil. When did a wise man ever talk so foolishly? Forget this war and come over to me. I won't keep on waiting long for my response. I'll make you a lord. I'll give you my daughter. You'll be an honored man here. You'll be a nobleman, free, and of all the miseries a subject must endure. When the Persian king is killed in battle, His crown and throne will be yours. I'll go on towards Byzantium, and I'll leave all this land and its wealth and armies in your possession. I say this because I like you. Your deeds show you possess the divine fire, and you know how to lead an army in war because your father and grandfather were both army commanders. This message is not a trick. I want to help you. Today you're opposing me with your contemptible little army. But even if you don't fall in with my wishes, this is the only message you'll ever hear from me. And here is where I end my tale for today. But I'll be back tomorrow with more tales. Many more tales. Until then, my friends,